Arctic Midwest. That's right. She said she's anxious to learn how to incorporate project management throughout the culture and the daily operations. That's a critical component. So let me introduce myself. First off, I am the Director of Learning and Development for JER HR Group. And Michelle is one of my key partners in the Learning and Development component of JER HR Group. She does a lot of work with us and does a lot of work in the healthcare industry. So she's a critical component. I have been with this consulting group for, I always forget, 15 going on 16 years, I think. And before that was in the corporate world in managing corporate learning and development. So I have had experience with both corporate and nonprofit. And I will tell you that certainly in the last 4 or 5 years, performance management is one of those things that has come to top of mind. And one of the things that we're seeing, our firm does a lot of work in compensation reviews. And of course, as the economy tightens and changes, organizations look at how they can be more efficient in their compensation practices. And we'll talk about total rewards in a minute. And as that comes up, invariably performance management comes up too. So we're really seeing the two tied very closely in discussions with our clients. And we'll get into that in just a minute. So let's get started, Grace. We'll move on. Today's discussion will follow this general topic list. Let's look at what has happened in talent development and the history of performance management. Look at trends that we've seen crop up and talk about what we're trying to accomplish in performance management. What are some different approaches? And how is technology redefining performance management? And that will lead us to talk about one example of a technology that's out there. If there's something that you see missing that you think maybe we need to cover and I don't see it, feel free to put a note in chat. Let's move on. You know, it's interesting when we think about performance management, it's been around for quite some time, but what's being measured in terms of performance has changed considerably. Early on in the early days of performance management, organizations were concerned about productivity. How productive is the particular organization? How many widgets? What are our sales numbers? And so in terms of performance management, that is where people were really trying to take the measurements. As it's evolved, we've looked at now, how are the people doing? Because that's what drives the engine of performance within an organization. So we've moved from that outside picture to now the inner picture, looking at individual goals, their results, and even their future potential. So the organization is starting to look at leveraging talent development and how that helps achieve organizational success. So we've gone to now looking at data on past performances to looking at how can we develop for future success. So this looking backward to now looking forward. Evaluation based on a snapshot in time, which was that annual review, to now looking at ongoing real-time assessment and coaching. Linked to compensation versus salary versus linked to total rewards. How you motivate your employees certainly may be their salary, but it may be some other components of the organization that you can add as rewards for excellent performance. And evaluation on, again, task completed versus potential for career development, tying in that individual development component to this. And so we're not just looking at projects and what they completed. All right, let's move on. And I see Christy says, when you have to have the hard conversations of performance with those not doing well, especially when we're short-staffed, and when people can leave so easily and go somewhere else. And I would add to that, when you're remote. Some of you, I suspect, are still going back and forth between remote versus being face-to-face. And that always makes those difficult conversations even more difficult when you can't be face to face. And particularly if you don't use a tool that uses video, you lose a large percentage of your communication when you don't see body signals. So the evolution that we've seen on performance management, we've talked about some of those. So here are some of the challenges that we continue to see. So we just talked about how do you motivate and monitor staff on the key organizational initiatives. We're seeing a lot of our organizations that we work with talk about goals, but what gets difficult is the idea of cascading goals. How do goals link to what the organization's doing? So the organization may have strategic goals. How does an individual link their activities to those strategic goals? And we still find that a lot of organizations, staff members have a difficult time seeing how, if I'm in accounting, how does that help my organization improve the service that we deliver within this particular industry? So the managers sometimes need some help to help them understand what that link is. That, accounting is critical. If the organization doesn't have a key idea of what their cash flow is, what their expenses are, and if they're being used wisely, then they may not have the resources needed to give the clients the service that they need. So there is definitely a link. It's often difficult to help staff members see that. This ongoing two-way feedback is absolutely essential. Real time, and we're even seeing a trend for feedback from not just the direct report to the manager and the manager to their direct report, but to team members. We do a lot of work across teams within our organizations now, and some of the better management tools allow for feedback throughout the organization. And when you start doing that, that gets even trickier and gets into the culture of your organization. Do people know how to give constructive feedback rather than just complaining or pointing blame? And so that becomes a part of performance management coaching and training when you enter into something where 360 feedback is allowed. It's an essential tool, but the challenge is if you start moving to there and have not had a good conversation with people who are giving the feedback, you can do more harm than good initially. And this gets into the role of the manager as someone who not only is overseeing activities that are critical within that organization and within their team, but also coaching their staff and their team on what they can do given their performance feedback and how to grow and develop. So then the manager also will coach on how to get stretch activities. You don't just go to do training and read a book. It's critical to find opportunities for that individual to grow and perhaps work on a project team that gives them some other opportunities. So my question to you is, within your current project management system, what are some goals you have to help meet these challenges? I'm watching chat, so if you've got something, let me know. I see we had a note previously about the challenge of clearly setting your goals, and that we talked about how difficult it is to clearly set goals within the organization and within staff members. I don't see anything in chat. So we talked about having the difficult conversations. We've talked about goal setting as two of the challenges. So on difficult conversations, one of the things I would say there is document. And that's just something that we talk a lot about within performance management. Documentation and quickly addressing issues as they come up. This is another reason why this ongoing two-way feedback, real time, and even the 360 part is so critical. So if you have an individual for which you're having difficult, you need to have a difficult conversation, the worst thing you can do is go in without preparing. So you need to do your homework. Perhaps you need to talk to people that they work with and get their sense of where things are. Make sure you document items or activities that you see that perhaps are below what you would prefer to see as accepted performance. And make sure as you have the conversation, you're clear on what your expectations are for improvement. A lot of times when people do performance evaluations, they'll have a scale, meets expectations, exceeds. One of the things that helps is to have conversations beforehand at the first of the year about what it means to exceed expectations. People have in their mind that meeting expectations is a C. It's not really all that good. And they feel disappointed if they don't get an exceeds or somewhat exceeds. And again, set the expectations with your team that for everyone to meet their expectations is excellent, particularly when you've got challenging priorities, you've got tight time frames, tight budgets. If an individual meets their expectations, they've done a darn good job. So what would it be if you exceeded? Perhaps you delivered it under budget. Perhaps you delivered it before the deadline. Perhaps you added some other elements to this that weren't anticipated. And if you see that with your staff working on those, be sure you document that and make sure they document it. So then at the end of the year or when you do your final evaluation, you can say, this is what it looks like to exceed. If you get in the habit of doing that documentation, when you do have to have those difficult conversations, you need to speak objectively. Try to be very specific about what the behavior is that needs to be changed and what the new behavior should be, and what resources are out there to help this individual. Just as a coach on a football team or a basketball team, be sure you can help give them guidance, motivate them, inspire them, and give them some tools to help improve. At the same time, it's important that that individual understand this is an important conversation. If that improvement's not happening, there may be other consequences, which may be that they could eventually lose their job. And you don't want to make people fearful, but they need to be realistic about what's going on. If you have a conversation with someone who's not doing well, then it's even more important to follow up within a week, within 2 weeks, very quickly to give feedback on how they're doing. So we did see a note saying that how can we keep improving when the job is being done and they're done great? And that's where it's hard. Right now we're setting goals and nobody knows what to set for themselves. That is tough. It's essential, again, within an organization to understand where the organization is heading, what are the strategic goals, and talk with the manager to find out what's our role. When we talk about setting goals, we always suggest that an individual staff member jot down their goals and think about what they need to be. The manager would set down those goals and think about what they should be. And then the two would talk together and compile what they think are their final goals. And that's essential. So I've got a question from Renee. How would you advise clients in terms of setting job goals? Should the goals include key metrics for tasks that are in their job description, or should they all be stretch project goals? That's a great question. In terms of goals, we suggest you try to keep those down to what Covey has always called the vital few, so that you're not overwhelmed with so many goals. We suggest you stick to 3 to 5 goals. And it's important in working with your staff that you define goal versus objective or task. A goal is a bigger picture. It is an achievement within a process or a project. It may have separate tasks that need to be accomplished, but those are not specifically goals. So when you have too many goals, go back and look at it. Perhaps the individual has put out tasks that really fall under one big goal. And so look at what are those goals. We also work with our clients in terms of looking at 3 types of goals. For an organization that has a well-defined strategic plan, then individuals throughout the organization know what the plan is, what the key objectives are within that and the strategic goals, and where they fit in. So then we also suggest that those 3 to 5 goals, there's 1 or 2 strategic goals. And then getting to Renee's question, there may be 1 or 2 that are what we call function or performance goals. Those are related to their job function. And then it may be related to their job function in that it makes their team or their function be more effective, do a better job. And then the 3rd category is personal goals. Those are the development goals. So that you're looking at all 3 areas, but you're looking at separate types of goals. So then we have from Christy, her comment is, we set goals, but at the same time each year, how can we keep improving when the job is being done and done great? I mentioned this one. So when they're doing a good job, the other thing that's difficult when you set goals once a year and you don't continue to have check-ins. This is why the ongoing feedback and the real-time check-ins are so critical, because priorities change. Some of the goals may be completed and may start more. So you need to watch and continue to do that. If someone's meeting expectations on their goals, then you may talk with them about, is there anything more they feel they could add to this? Are there other experiences that they would like to have? So perhaps there's another project they want to work on, and try to do stretch activities that way. Those are a few tips. Let's move on and look at the next slide here, Grace. So we're talking about, as you heard from many of these tips, really taking a different approach with performance management. And one of the best tools that is out there now is using the cloud. Everybody, lots of organizations use their HRIS, their employee information, accounting, all kinds of things now are based in the cloud. And what that means is they have access to it from anywhere. There's a huge amount of security in doing that. And you can do it real time. And it's usually with a system that is updated by some third party, so you don't have to worry about keeping the software updated. But it gives you real-time access, which is so critical for your staff, your management, your team members. And you can limit who has access to the performance data in this area. It gives you a place to store your documents, to track your data, so you always have it. And the best tools are linked to your HR information system. Also, you can customize content, forms, feedback options. As you look at tools that are cloud-based, look at the ease with which those forms can be customized. If you have to pay a fee and hire someone to be a software engineer, you know, that's an option, but it's trickier. And if you're one that needs to be able to work on the forms themselves, look for a tool that allows you to do the customization, almost as if it were a Word document. Some of the better practices are to give coaching guidance within your organization. Make sure that's a part of your performance management program. If your performance management tool that you're using also provides tips, on-demand videos, things to give you some sources for coaching guidance, that's really icing on the cake. Look for access to other on-demand development modules, access to competency assessments. We're finding also that many times within performance management, we need to look at not only what the people are doing, but what skills the individuals have and how are they within those skills. And so often there's a tool that you can use to help identify what are key competencies, really customize those to the ones for your organization, and then give the individuals an opportunity to self-evaluate, and the manager then has a form that they can look at, and they can have a discussion together about what behaviors need to be included or enhanced. And a lot of times this discussion with the managers is so critical, because if there's not enough discussions, the employee may think, you know, I'm doing great. I've done this, this, and this, but the manager may not be aware of it. So when you have that discussion, the points in which there's disagreement are perhaps the most important aspects of the discussion. So that's a key, to have your pre-thinking, your assessments from both parties, and then talk about how you compare. So this is really collaborative in terms of goal setting, delivery of those goals, and looking at your career path. So let's look at an opportunity for an online portal. Next slide, Grace. Dynamic and intelligent, we said, is so important. It can be altered, it can be changed. Starting something that's different in terms of a process and a form, always think about the impact for the culture within the organization. Make sure, communicate with people. They understand what's going on and why. See it as an investment in the employee growth and the organization's growth. And with this time of the resignation trend that we're seeing, help to retain staff so that they're very helpful, that they can continue to grow within the organization. I reference here the ebook, and I think in the invitation we may have referenced that, but there's an ebook that's out there that this is really sort of a summary of. And you can go to the website, jerhrgroup.com, look on white papers, and look for this ebook. There's no charge for it, but it gives you some more thoughts about this entire process and helps you to get a feel for what needs to be done. And then finally, let's look at the next slide. A little bit more about the ebook, a little bit more about what we can find in that. So the one I want to look at is the next slide, Grace, which is on a tool that JER HR Group has developed called Review Cloud. It's not by far the only one out there. There's certainly lots of them, and it's important that you look at something. If you think you want to use an online cloud-based portal, look at some of those options. But this particular one has an option for 24/7 feedback from not only the manager and the direct report, but you can identify who else needs to be included in the feedback loop. So it's an opportunity for 360 feedback. Simple software. It's not terribly complicated to get it set up on your system. It's not a huge change that needs to happen in terms of software engineering. We see lots of return on investment from those clients who are using it now, just in the reduction in management and administrative hours in terms of receiving feedback, tools, getting back other things to people, sending documents around. Communication can be aligned to your mission. You've got accountability. It's customizable. Grace is trying to figure out the echo, I think someone mentioned in the chat box. You will be able to see a dashboard. There are training videos available. This is actually what we're going to talk about next month. So you will be able to see next month, if you join our free webinar, an actual demo. Matt Cross with our trainery component within JER HR Group is one who will help talk you through a little bit more about this particular cloud-based online portal for performance management. So be sure to join us next time if you've not signed up, so you can learn a little bit more about Review Cloud. We are down to our last 5 minutes, and I wanted to make sure I left time in case there are any additional questions or comments from anyone. Scanning back through the chat to see if I missed anything. This was a very, very quick summary of our approach to performance management. And by no means is it meant to be the answer to all of the issues. But it certainly is one that's coming to the surface within our clients. Of the projects that I'm working on now, I would say probably 75% are based in performance management. So, and 9 times out of 10, we've got clients who are moving from once a year evaluations to now doing them more frequently. And the challenge when you do that is, how do you do that final evaluation when it's time to look at salary? We've had clients we've talked about who've heard, you know, we've gone through trends of no ratings and not tying to salary. Do we really need to? And what we say is, if you don't use ratings, how are people evaluated? How do you know who are your top performers? And inevitably, it's human nature to do that. What the ratings do, what the documentation does, is give you objectivity, which avoids the surprises when you do have to link to salary. And if you don't link your final evaluations to salary, how do you decide raises? And it leans more towards a subjective component if you don't step in there and do some system that gives you the ability to collect data and stay in touch on a regular basis. So while we're aware of some of the trends that have happened over the years and some trends to get away from the more formal performance management, we see that that ongoing conversation, performance management coaching, and continued access is critical. So that is it. Anybody have a question or a comment?
Okay,
Somebody
Michelle
want
has
to
a
know about the
question.
scale. All right, so before we, let me just say that the scale, we look at between 3 and 5, and kind of depends on your organization of what works for you. And then someone asked a question about COLA and merit raises based upon performance or flat increases. We've got people that have not liked the COLA because it doesn't indicate who's done well. We've got people who do a straight COLA, but they also then look at bonuses or some other types of ways to reward people. And this is where we get into what we call total rewards. So your compensation is not just what your salary is or your bonus. There may be some other incentives that are in there as part of performance incentives. So we've got a variety, but yes, we feel like some kind of consistent method for tracking and for indicating where people fall on the performance scale is important. And make sure it's communicated and clearly delineated within the organization how adjustments are made to compensation and any other rewards. That's it. That's the last comment I see. Thank you for joining us, and join us next month when we talk more about Review Cloud.